Hello, everyone. Hello. As everyone comes in, I'll just get started because we have a really fantastic discussion that we're hoping to get to today. So I'll keep my message brief. So hello and welcome to today's AgeWell webinar, Inclusive Research Partnerships, Breaking Barriers Together. My name is Alison Schneider, and I'm the Education and Training Manager at AgeWell, whose vision is that Canada's leadership in technology and aging benefits the world. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that although we're meeting virtually today, AgeWell operates on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, which have cared for the land for thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty, which is an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. I'm really grateful to work on this land today and every day. You may live and work in different territories, so I encourage you to reflect on the land on which you are located and to consider your relationship to that land and to the people who are the traditional keepers of that land. And we have a couple of resources for you to check out that will help you to learn more. Okay, so before we get launched into our session today, a few words about AgeWell for anyone who doesn't know us. AgeWell is Canada's technology and aging network, and our mission is to develop a community of researchers, older adults, caregivers, partners, and future leaders that accelerates the development of technology-based solutions that makes a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. So today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on AgeWell's YouTube channel. Our speakers will be taking questions after their talk, so you're invited to post your questions, comments, and experiences in the chat or in the Q&A box. I will turn things over now to Dr. Josephine McMurray, an Associate Scientific Director at AgeWell and an Associate Professor at Wilfrid Laurier University's School of Business and Economics. Josephine.
Good morning, everybody. I feel like I should congratulate you all. This is prime vacation time before the long weekend and the start of the semester. So thank you for your commitment to e-learning today. I'd also like to acknowledge that the land from which I'm streaming from today is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, recognized by Treaty 3. And I recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and honor their deep connection to it. Today, I have the greatest pleasure introducing and facilitating a discussion with three people who I not only hold in the highest professional esteem, but who I'm proud to call friends. Many of you will know them already, and full bios have been posted on the events page, and a link to the page is going to be placed into the chat. Dr. Olive Bryanton is a PEI treasure and known as an educator, an advocate, and for her dissertation research giving voice to older rural women who are aging in place. Dr. Jim Mann is a distinguished research author and educator and is also known for his advocacy to reduce stigma associated with dementia. And finally, certainly not least, Ron Boleno, whose personal experiences caring for his father before he succumbed to Alzheimer's led him to a life as an educator and advocate for the use of technology, community, and research to support families just like his. So welcome to you all. Lovely to see all of your faces. It really is just wonderful to be here with you. While today's discussion might touch on older adults as research participants, our goal is in fact to help you understand how to elevate research outcomes through research partnerships and collaborations with older adults and those with lived experience. So with that in mind, I'm going to direct my first question to Jim on the West Coast, and then we'll work our way back across the country with Ron and then Olive in PEI. Just a quick note to all three of you, we have a lot of questions that we want to ask you today, so I may occasionally gently interrupt you to keep us on track. But Jim, first off for you, could you tell us a little bit about your journey as a researcher or research collaborator?
Thanks, Josephine. Until my diagnosis of Alzheimer's, I really had no understanding that research was anything other than microscopes and petri dishes. I certainly had not heard of psychosocial or quality of life research. My awakening came on September 14th, 2011, when an email invitation arrived in my inbox. I was invited to be a knowledge user and a member of a research advisory steering committee that would be tasked to provide input and direction for a project. I was invited into a strange new world. I didn't know what a knowledge user was or what was expected of me. To be honest, I knew absolutely nothing about everything concerning research. So naturally for me, I said yes. And I jumped in the deep end for the 4-year CIHR funded project. That experience played a role in my receiving another email that arrived October 2015. Dr. Allison Finney at UBC introduced me to Lillian Hung, a doctoral student in nursing, who was doing her research on how to improve care for people with dementia in acute care hospitals. Dr. Finney said it would be of great benefit to her to hear your thoughts on the work she's planning, and I think you will find it quite exciting too. I knew a PhD was a doctor of philosophy, and at that point I knew a wee bit about research, so I said, yes, I would love to work with Lillian. She drove out to meet me later that month, and we got to know each other over a great cup of coffee. Since that meeting, I'm proud to say Dr. Hung and her team and I have had 23 papers and articles published. It's been 12 years since my first invitation, and I have gradually increased my involvement in research to now being co-principal investigator of a project that produced an online toolkit, flippingstigma.com, and I am co-investigator of 3 projects, 2 of which are technology focused with Dr. Hung. You know, COVID-19 gave us too many negative experiences, but a positive for me were the unique possibilities that our use of Zoom introduced. One new opportunity I've had was working on a participatory action research project with a researcher in Germany. PAR is a new concept in Germany, which provided me with great and new experiences. Through my journey with research, I've seen and experienced a lot. It's been a hell of a ride. Yes, I've learned much about the research process, but I've also gained valuable insight into associated areas such as ethics, ethics boards, assumptions of capability, and consent. For example, Dr. Hung and I co-lead a telepresence robot project focused on long-term care. Our ethics public application for the first phase was rejected, with the ethics board writing in part, people with dementia is a vulnerable group. How would they not potentially be coerced into participation in the work? Independent Senator Stan Kuchar was recently quoted saying, just because an individual might belong to a group that is considered to be vulnerable doesn't mean that individual is vulnerable. We reworked the ethics application, resubmitted it, and the project was approved. In the text, Medical Research Ethics, Challenges in the 21st Century, that was published earlier this year, is a chapter I co-wrote with Dr. Gloria Pervine and Dr. Susan Cox, entitled Centering the Human Subject, Catalyzing Change in Ethics and Dementia Research, that discusses at length many of the issues around ethics, ethics boards, and unconscious bias. I am very proud of this work.
Thanks, Jim. That's wonderful. It sounds as if your personality got the better of you. So stepping up and taking that first step has led to an enormous number of opportunities for you to actually be involved directly with that research. So it sounds like having the courage to step right up at the beginning, which is very consistent with your personality. I know you're a joiner. Can I throw that question open now, perhaps, to Ron? Tell us a little bit about your journey as a researcher and research collaborator.
Yeah, thanks, Sir Josephine, and greetings, everyone. So I always like to tell it as a story. So my story was with my dad being diagnosed with Alzheimer's back in 2007, and then he passed away at home peacefully in 2018. And it wasn't until 2015 that I connected with the research community. Simply put, all those successes, all those failures for the first 5 to 7 years of our journey, my family's journey, I was just dealing with it, figuring it out with mom, with Lucky the cat as well. There was a cat in the picture here. And then eventually, because of some of the stuff that I was doing around technology back in the day, again, pre-pandemic, I was doing stuff with cameras in the home on an iPhone 3. I was using GPS to keep my dad safe out in the community. Even low-tech solutions, working with the coffee shops, the restaurants, to make sure my dad was safe. All that came to a point where the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto and Ontario kind of knocked at my door and said, "We kind of heard about some of the work you're doing, Ron. Can you come and just tell us how you're doing this?" Sat down with them one day. And again, for the older adults and caregivers who are here, it simply starts with telling your story, right? You start with your story, your journey, and then from that, sometimes solutions or the understanding of the challenges pop up. And the Alzheimer's Society's kind of realized that said, "Hey, Ron, we'd like you to meet this new group starting up called AgeWell." So timing does matter sometimes. Sometimes it's about being in the right place or being ready to share your story at that ideal time. And they said, "Can you come to a meeting with this guy named Alex Mihailidis and Lily Liu?" So Lily's the dean right now at University of Waterloo. Alex is connected to AgeWell. He was actually one of the ones that helped start it. He's well known. And was at a meeting for 2 days with them, sharing my story, and just showing some of the tools I'm using. And it was, at that point, like, Jim, you thought that they were like, for me, in my head, I said, "Oh, they're dressed up in white lab coats. This is what a researcher is." And I said, "Oh, they look like this next person, But the one thing going into that meeting, I already knew who these researchers were, Alex and Lily, because I actually saw Alex present one time, did not know what he was all about. And honestly, I've said this to Alex, and I said, the first time I saw you present, it's like, yeah, you're supposed to be the expert, but I didn't really find your stuff that exciting. It's like, I'm already doing other stuff past that. Same thing with Lily when she was at the University of Alberta. She was doing stuff on GPS. I said, "Lily, why did you guys spend that much money on grant money when I could have given you these answers, right away?" Right. So that's what I kind of challenged them on at that meeting. And from then, that's when AgeWell was just starting. I got invited to join AgeWell. So that was the beginning of my journey in research, to say, okay, you know what? Apparently I thought you were the experts, but you're the ones collecting the data, helping, get these stories, okay, from all of us, from Olive, from Jim, from myself, figuring out what the data pieces are, and then to kind of bring it back to the community. Okay, so that's how I kind of started realizing. I said, okay, you know what? I have a place here. And, I said, let me get on board. And there was that opportunity to say, as long as I'm willing to speak and share, and if, you guys are open to listening to us, that's really what I kind of came into it and how I approached it. So that's where it started. At this moment right now, pretty much in the past 8 years, that first 1 year, started traveling to some universities to help present. I did a summer institute that very first year, and I met this gentleman, Jim Mann, for the first time. And Josephine, you were there, I believe, the first summer institute.
I was, yes,
right?
yeah.
And
yeah.
that was to help train the next, up and coming researchers and academics. So that, to me, also is a little bit of a passion piece on my part, is that this can't just be us. It needs to grow to a larger level. So there is that advocacy piece that I kind of got into. And just to finish off, some of the research projects I've done, probably 40 to 60 now over the years that have been funded. That's a lot. That's not normal, but and that's not including the other 40 to 100 that didn't get funding that I've been asked to be part of. Right now,
I'm glad that you've had that experience as a researcher, which, rejection and disappointment is what we get up to every single day.
And that's something in the research that's not talked about enough. So I just wanted to bring that up, that it's not all like, okay, everything's going to move forward, but it is just something, that I just want to share. And just to finish off, I just want to share that this falls into the patient-oriented research based in healthcare, what we're talking about today. We're not participants that we're talking about. We're talking about as collaborators, co-designers, sometimes even research assistants on a research team. That's what we're talking about today, our involvement. And so I'll just throw out two groups, OSU, the Ontario SPORE Support Unit, which I think will be in the link here, Strategy and Patient-Oriented Research. For those who are interested, take a look at that. I'm happen to be on the Ontario board. And another one is called PERC, which is a Patient Expertise in Research Collaboration, which I'm part of with McMaster. So some best practices of how to involve people in research for your
awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ron. That's wonderful. And it sounds like you turned what at the time was a learned expertise into, almost a career now, I think, in supporting researchers and research. So wonderful. Olive, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects that you've been involved with outside perhaps of your original dissertation?
Well, thank you very much, Josephine. Like Ron and Jim, I guess I came into the scene really not knowing anything about research. I think I was always an advocate for older adults, and I'm not sure how I became that, but that's been a passion in my life. I did get involved in research when I decided to go back to school. And I started in my 40s and went through various stages, and I did get my PhD in 2018. So I've experienced research from a variety of perspectives, from being someone who knew nothing to being a student, and then being invited to be involved as a person who had some lived experience. And then I kind of became a colleague, and then an educator and a mentor. So some of the research I'm currently involved in is a study that I was actually the lead researcher for the province, and it was asking older adults what government should know about what they need to continue aging in their place of choice. And something that I really learned from Age Well is that it really takes a team to do good research. So my team consisted of older adults, students, and some academics. This was a very interesting study in that it was multi methods. And so there was two researchers with me, and they were both quantitative researchers, and I'm a qualitative researcher. So I had a lot of learning to do there, and still do. But it was the first time that I had interviewed or that I had researched older adults in general. My studies were always around women, usually 70 and over or 85 and older. So for the first time, I was looking at both men and women and of all ages. And for the first time, I really saw the difference in the cohorts. And that really astounded me that, within our aging population, there are three cohorts, and that those cohorts have very different worldviews and values and wants and needs and aspirations. So for me, that was an amazing opportunity. I'm in the process of starting a new study, and this time I'm working with a couple of nonprofits in our province, and it's a whole new area for me. This time I'm looking at veterans who are transitioning from military life to civilian life. And I am looking at all veterans, but with a special focus on women and gender diverse persons. So this is a whole new area. I knew nothing about military. I'm learning lots just doing my literature search. So to me, it's exciting to have new networks and to be involved in all ages. I'm a firm believer in intergenerational work, and I think we learn so much from each other. My involvement in Age Well gave me an opportunity to mentor some grad students. And I just noticed that one of the students I'm working with just came online not very long ago. And we have a meeting at 2:30 today, so or 2:30 my time. So it's very exciting to be working with young people and the work they're doing to find out just what is going on and how much we can learn from each other. My work has brought me to be involved with a national organization, the National Seniors Council. And in that, I was appointed to the council in December of last year. And we are looking at opportunities for older, what programs and services are there for older adults. And I just see another of my students that just came on. He's from BC, Jim. So this is so much fun. But with the National Seniors Council, we have been doing research, very intensive research on what programs and services are available for older adults to continue aging in their places of choice. And it's intense in the fact that our research has to be given to the ministers by the end of September. So there's been a lot of work done and a lot of great learnings. I've also just been recently invited to participate as an advisor on the International Longevity Council. And what's exciting about that is it's looking at the rights, human rights, but specifically the rights of older persons. And under that umbrella is the Canadian Coalition Against Ageism. And ageism is definitely one of my strong areas of interest. So it's been a total learning experience. It continues to be a learning experience. And, if there's any older adult out there who would like to get involved or are invited to get involved, I certainly hope they say yes, because you don't have to be an expert to get involved. You're an expert as a person who's got the lived experience.
I think that's a wonderful place to transition to our next question, and thank you for that, Olive. Your expertise is well known, and I think just laying out the learning journey that you've had is one that backs up that idea that you don't have to be an expert to start. You just have to be curious.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are, curious, all of us. Ron, I'm going to throw the next question over to you. And it's a good lead in from Ola's last comment. Do you have were there any personal challenges that you faced getting involved with research or authorship when you first started out? I imagine now you're a seasoned professional with all of those projects that you have under your belt, but can you talk a little bit about some of the things that challenged you at the beginning?
So anytime, and this is not just with researchers, but anytime I've always had to connect with a new community, I always have to figure out what's the language, how do you communicate, what's the lingo. Okay,
Sure.
with all due respect to the research community, I'm going to say you all love your acronyms. There are hundreds and thousands of acronyms from, sorry, I just have a list here. What's a PI? KT and KM. I'm just throwing out these letters. Some of you will know, and some will say, what is that? So PI, principal investigator, like a Josephine. KT and KM, knowledge translation mobilization. PLWD, okay, person living with dementia. Like it's vice versa. HQP, highly, and I get confused with that. Highly qualified personnel, professional.
Yep, you got it.
Okay,
Yep.
CIHR, Canadian State. So all this lingo, NRC, even AgeWell had their AgeWell stood for something if people don't know that, which is aging gracefully, blah, 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 blah. So all that is, I just got overwhelmed. So that's something of how do we communicate? And I realize it's not always about me learning your language, that's important. but also that research community getting to our language, okay, communicating with us the way we speak, okay, our terms and all that. So that was one piece that I had to figure out at the very beginning, just that communication.
So how did you, Ron,
Yeah.
how did you handle that? Because having been in situations where, I mean, it pretty much happens with any profession or any, a new board, there's always jargon that goes along with that. So how did you actually adjust to that? What tactics did you use?
So I do that even in presentations right now to say, hey, I have jargon that I'm going to communicate, that we're all going to communicate. Maybe note it down, okay? And it takes maybe a few meetings, right? A few, interactions, and that's why the ability to not just, have meetings with us just at your research team meetings, okay? To have side meetings is what I would ask. For me personally, as many people know, I'd rather have a meal with you. Let's have a meal or a coffee virtually or in person. Let's just chat, even 50 minutes, half an hour, in between those meetings, okay, to kind of, hash out some of these things, especially those that are new and are being onboarded, okay, into the research space, okay? You always got to remember, where is Olive, Jim, and Ron, in their research, experience compared to someone that might be just 6 months into it and all that stuff. So that's that big part, Josephine, yeah, on that.
Thank you so much. Jim, does that change when you're living with a disease that sort of might make some of those interactions more challenging? Did you notice that there were any sort of challenges that you faced that were unusual, do you think?
I in response, thinking of what Ron had said, I remember being in a meeting, and I think we were reviewing the minutes or whatever it was of the previous one. And I remember how I handled it was I congratulated everybody on putting so many acronyms on one page. And
So humor worked, I gather.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So
that's important.
so should I be answering the question or
No, that's okay. No, that I
I'm
just wanted to
confused
see if,
now.
no, please don't. I went out of the run of shows. So, Olive, did you notice any challenges that you felt were sort of, personally were challenging for you when you first started?
Well, I still have challenges.
Uh, uh-huh.
It's not just when you first start. I think when you're doing your education, you are imagining to yourself you're getting to know everything, but all you find out is what you don't know. So going back to my um, research for the province, when it came to analysis, as I had said, the two academics I had with me who were the quantitative researchers did their work, and it was up to me as a qualitative researcher to do the analysis. And I was terrified. I had no idea. I mean, I'm a new researcher, and I was doing a conference last year at the Canadian Association of Gerontology, and someone was presenting at the same session as I was presenting. And I had said, we've got the quantitative done, it's the qualitative we need. That person said, if you need help, I'll help you. She was a professor from Northern Ontario. And then after we got home, I got an email from her saying, I really meant that. So I took her up on it. So via Zoom, she was helping. And as I said, I had a team, and some of the team were older adults. And one of those older adults was also a retired professor. So she and I and the professor from Ontario did the analysis. So, I mean, that it's networking, it's working with others and really appreciating what's out there or what's on your team. So always have a team.
That's such great advice. The depth that comes of understanding of data that comes from different and diverse perspectives is so important, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That was really, really interesting. I wonder if I could stay with you, Olive, and then challenge you a little bit on this one. You talked before about ageism. That's one stereotype. It's a perception that people have about their interactions with older adults. Have you encountered this in your research? And perhaps more importantly, I wonder if you could talk about how you addressed it, how you challenged it, to move through, to improve the interaction.
I think all of you should go first. Oh, I think I'll on mute.
Okay, there I'm on. As I said, ageism is really close to my heart and an area I'm very interested in because it impacts all ages, but I think it impacts more on older persons because over time they internalize ageism, and it's such an insidious thing that people don't even realize that ageism is impacting their lives. And for older people, it really debilitates them, and they're losing out on so much that they could be doing and seeing. My own experiences have been positive, and a good example is I was presenting at a conference, a gerontology conference, and I was trying to put my poster up. And these two young men who had also put up a poster came over and helped me. And so, after we were chatting, and so they said, is this a PhD you're doing? And I said, yes. And so one young fellow very politely said, look, do you mind if I ask how old you are? And I said, no, I'm 81. And he immediately said, we should be celebrating you. And now I took that as a compliment, but I was talking to a younger woman who said, that's ageism. She said, how dare he think that you should be special because of your age? So I think a lot of it comes around to to your own perspective. Another example is it was my committee who had to deal with ageism more than I did. My PhD committee were asked by colleagues, why are you wasting your time being a committee for an older person? So they had to do a bit of educating as well. But I see it so often in people denying themselves of learning opportunities or opportunities to do things because they're 50 years old and they're saying, oh, I'm too old to do that. So it's just so debilitating. And so every opportunity I have, I will note to someone in a very polite way that, that's really ageist. When you're talking to someone and they can't remember something, they say, oh, I'm having a senior moment. That really irritates me terribly. Another thing that irritates me is governments and others talking about our seniors. Seniors don't belong to them. So there are so many things that are there. It is so evident, but we don't see it because it's so invasive and has become a norm for a lot of people. So a lot of work needs to be done. And I'm really excited that we have a Canadian coalition against ageism. And I hope it's going to make a difference.
Fantastic. Ron, Jim, anything you wanted to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Jim? Oh, you muted yourself, Jim.
I thought I had taken myself off. I think it is so easy to lump everybody together. And that is the challenge, to the seniors advocate in BC gave a presentation where I was speaking as well, that a few years ago, where she talks about how everybody is lumping seniors in so that everybody in long-term care is the same. And she uses the example, of two residents the same age, and one's name is April and the other's Martha or whatever. And she goes through how different they are. So, like it is basically a challenging perceptions all the time. And for me, it goes beyond the older adult or my age into people with dementia. And I have, I find it fascinating how, we've all had, and I've experienced awkward moments of, eating or standing alone at coffee or lunch breaks, not just in high school, but at the, first or second meeting of an advisory group. And so fine, I'm there to provide input on something I know intimately. And it's interesting to watch some of the researchers, how at either the next meeting or the next year, or whatever, how their attitude, you can just see it, their attitude has changed, because you are no longer that, ticking the box, oh yeah, we have to have somebody with dementia. So, I like to be subtle, but I am always trying to change perceptions. But as it relates to research, Josephine, I just have to read you this quote from a paper. It is just, we talk about so much about patient-oriented research and researchers and patients, although I hate that. So Marie Michelle Pratt et al. In their 2023 paper, Researchers' Experiences with Patient Engagement in Health Research, a scoping review and thematic synthesis, included an interesting quote from a researcher. "I've got to be really careful as to what I say and do," this researcher said. "PPI's really trendy at the minute. Patients should be researchers. Why don't we just effing bring a load of patients to come in and sit around my desk? Well, why did I bother doing a PhD? Do you know what I mean? So it's like really difficult, because these people are quite capable people, but they've not had the training. They've not worked as a researcher." So I love that.
So really interesting. And I think we've heard this consistently then, is challenging your perspective so that you listen to every person that you are working with as an individual, understanding that their experience is very, very different. And in fact, to Olive's point, it doesn't matter whether they are over 55. In fact, we can expand that to everywhere. I think challenging our perspectives is really, really important. Rowan, go ahead.
Just one tip, I'll keep this one short here, just on this piece. For researchers, for teams that are bringing, older adults, caregivers, I always suggest discuss intent at the very beginning as much as you can. Intent, expectations, and the people are going to screw up when we're communicating, okay? Specifically this group, I believe in my heart that no one is ageist in the crowd that we're working with, okay? But it's how we communicate, okay, how we deliver messages, okay, sometimes gets reinterpreted in a different way. Okay, could be ageist, like Olive's example. 2 people you looked at, those 2 young researchers, you embrace that, where someone interprets that as ageist, right? So it's the intent is something that I say, if I say anything that might sound ageist or the acronyms don't make sense, but the intent is for us to all move the work forward together. So I just want to make sure people understand that we're going to all screw up, okay? But as long as we know the intent is we want to take it to the other level, all can say, well, I don't look at it that way, but maybe it could be communicated in a different way, or labels and all that stuff. But just something I want people to kind of look at.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Ron. And I think those practical examples are really, really important for us, but as researchers, but also as research collaborators. I wonder if I can stick with you just for a moment. And I know we're going to run out of time really quickly, but I wonder if you've got some other examples of that where collaborations or research has really worked well, and some of the things that you think has contributed to that success.
So I'll go straight into it. So for me, I like to break it up into different stages of when you bring us at the table. Okay. AgeWell has been one of those organizations very early on, 5, 6, or 8 years ago, whatever, to start making sure that the patient or the older adult or the caregiver voice is at the table. Okay. So that could be simply as setting aside even some funding, okay, when you do your budgets, okay, to say, okay, we got to put some kind of honorarium, some kind of remuneration, not that it has to go to them, but it's offered as an option. Okay, I always say that we come to the table, some people are coming as volunteers, but honestly we've had 3, 5, 10, 15 years of our work in our lives being given, and everyone else is getting paid for that day. I always say, sit at the table and say, who's getting paid today in this 1 hour meeting, right, and who isn't, but who's offering some golden nuggets. Okay, but for me, the 3 different stages before the grant is there, so having us at the beginning as you're creating the application, the grant, that's already part of it. During, when it's funded, assuming it's funded, okay, and then post funding, okay, is after it's funded. There are different things you could be doing with your partners at the table. So again, co-designing at the beginning, okay, seeing what the language is. Once it's funded, it's kind of like making sure that they're equal at the table. Many times, especially those that are new, are quiet. Okay, great researchers on the team bring in other team players to say, not just waiting for us at the end to speak in the last 5, 10 minutes. So how do you think of that, Ron or Oliver, Jim, at the end? It's throughout those meetings. Okay, so sometimes having them lead at the beginning. So that's important. And then even when it's almost finishing or at the end, is helping with knowledge translation, mobilization, maybe presenting, okay, and helping it, get that impact to the next crowd. Don't just make research a pilot project and it's just kept with this community. It has to get out there. So those are the best ones where I see teams utilize us as best as possible, is at those 3 different stages. And we could do a deeper dive in another webinar on how to do that.
We could indeed. Yeah. And I think that's something that we should consider for sure. Olive, do you have anything to add to that as far as your engagement in research and the things that have really worked well for you?
Well, I think I can go back to Ron had mentioned a summer institute. I was involved in a summer institute with AgeWell, and just watching the collaboration and between the researchers, the older adults, the caregivers, and the people living with the experience. It was just amazing, and to watch how people were learning from each other. So I really think that we do have to work together as a team of all ages, and that's the only way we'll understand each other and really come out with some really, really good research. It's the people who are experiencing who are the experts. They know what they're experiencing, and giving them an opportunity to share with the people who are considered the researchers is because they are learning so much from the people who are experiencing. So the lived experience is so important, and I am so happy to see researchers and people with the lived experience and the young researchers coming up. I think it's amazing.
Actually, that's really interesting, all of this idea that the learning and development that can happen for both groups, but in particular with older adults, that if they are given that, it's almost like a form of remuneration, as Ron said, you know, like offer us some financial remuneration, but then also that ability to develop and grow as well. Jim, did you have anything to add to that you wanted, or should I move on?
Just one quick point that Dr. Hung has her lab at UBC, IDEA Lab, Innovation in Dementia Care and Aging. And she has about 100 students there, but they're all interdisciplinary. So, and she, you know, on every project, there's always patient partners. I co-lead a few of them with her, but it is such a learning experience for the students. I like to think I've done 2 lunch and learns for, you know, with them and so on. So I think there are some great examples, and certainly what is being done at that lab is phenomenal in making sure that every project has that intergenerational learning.
That's fantastic. And actually, a beautiful segue into my last question, which I'm going to start with you, Jim. You probably have some idea about the kind of changes that you think, if they were brought in, would help to break down some of these barriers and encourage more older adults to actively not just participate in research, but to collaborate and to write, etc. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think a lot of this relies on visibility, relies on the visibility of the older adults in their various roles. Because I always remember an article years ago in the Alzheimer's Society newsletter that had a little item about something I had done in a picture. And a woman that ended up coming to the support group I attended at that point said, you know, that's why she was there. When she got the diagnosis, she went home, didn't tell her doctor, basically didn't leave her place. But she saw, if he can do it, so can I. And that, I think, is so, it's that living example, but for other people, because I'm going to go to a place that a lot of people I don't think I have a lot of support with, but I think we overuse the term co-research. I think for a lot of people, it would scare them. A lot of people, it would, you know, they'd think, what do I know about research? Being a co-researcher? I'm not an academic. I wouldn't fit in. And so I think all of this together would give people the confidence to get involved. And there is nothing better than a conversation over a great cup of coffee or tea to break down barriers, to show that research and academia aren't just far off, you know, restricted area for people. And it allows for researchers to understand who might be involved. I look at getting onto research projects as almost going through an interview process, making sure that everybody's going in the right direction, that this is the right research for you, but making sure that there's sort of a fit.
And I think that also speaks to our understanding of this type of research that we're doing now, Jim, is that, I mean, in the past, no excuses for researchers, but in the past, this idea of arm's length objectivity was something that was really valued. And what I think we have come to now is an understanding that, yes, absolutely, objectivity is one of the things that we can bring to the table, but that a deeper understanding comes with relationships and spending time and truly attempting to understand the perspective. So your point is very well made. I have to say now, I'm going to have to stop here, and I'm going to hand it over to Alison to perhaps stick handle any questions that have come up in the chat that she wants to direct to anybody in the panel here. And if anybody in the audience have got any questions, we specifically put this time aside. Trust me, I'll fill it with more questions if you don't have any. But if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat now, and Alison will read them for you and direct them to one of the panels.
Thanks so much, Josephine. So as we're waiting for folks to put their questions in the chat, we have seen some lovely comments, really reflecting how much our three panelists have been celebrated within their community at AgeWell and throughout. Some HQPN researchers reflecting on some of the great comments you have been making and advice that you've been giving. So thanks so much. But as a education and training coordinator or manager, I do have a question, maybe that the HQP or early researchers will find helpful. So what advice would you give to HQP and researchers who are looking to initiate collaborations with older adults and caregivers, but don't know where to begin? So what should they keep in mind? Who would like to go first? Ron.
I'm ready to jump on that one there. So, but it relates to Jim and Josephine, what you're just talking about. Right now, it's about relationships. Okay, it's getting better at creating relationships, at networking. Okay, just that skill of networking. Don't be that researcher that's in a lab in a white coat, hidden away. Okay, that's there's a role for that. We're not doing clinical trials here. That's not the work that most of this community does. Okay, this is about people's lives in a different way, about the quality of life, how they live. And the way you got to do that is actually going out and networking with them and communicating with them. But it can't always be the Jim, the Olive, and the Ron now. Okay, it's the next stage. We moved on from that. Okay, that earlier on, it was about simply who is the caregiver we can find. Grab that. Who's the person living with dementia? That's Jim, right? Like there's a whole bunch of others that are ready to be part of this community. It doesn't have to be with AgeWell, and that the way to do that is to have coffee, is to just say, hey, what's your thoughts about maybe participating in some research? But it's the ability to network and create relationships. One last tip on that is find those who are already a little bit of leaders in their space or have a community, okay, that might be leading a advisory group at a hospital or a patient group or whatever. They will help find other people for you. It doesn't have to be them, but you could say, hey, we're looking for someone that's interested in virtual reality, and caregiving. If you know someone, they will help find others for you. So it's about networking in my part and creating those relationships that you can reach out to. So.
Jim?
Go ahead.
If I could just, I'm sorry, I was just going to jump in here with Ron and say, I mean, for the researchers out there who are thinking, this seems like a lot of work, and why would I get into this kind of space in any, substantive way? I mean, the British Medical Journal has had a policy for years now that says we do not publish research if we possibly can that does not involve people who are stakeholders in the space. And you see stakeholders in this space. They're not just Ron, whose dad, passed away from Alzheimer's, Olive, who did a PhD later in life, Jim, who lives with the challenges of dementia in his life. I mean, these people have rich understandings of all of the environment in which they are living, the things that they are doing, and all of those contribute to what they have. And they're living examples of this incredibly heterogeneous population that we are living with. So often, as Jim and Olive and Ron have all pointed out, we as researchers tend to talk about older adults, and we tend to lump them together as sort of, anybody over the age of 55. I'm one of them. Not the researcher who lumps. I'm one of those over 55. So, I mean, I understand acutely that diversity. So I just wanted to say, you know, like that diversity, as Ron and others have pointed out, is so important to our research. Go ahead, Jim. I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, Allison, two things. One is go in with patience, and also please don't go in with assumptions.
And I would like to add that it's, if you're looking for an older adult to be involved, ask them. I think they would be very appreciative of being asked. And they should realize the value of the voice of the older person in the research. And there's lots of good examples of what can happen because of that. So older adults do appreciate being invited to participate. Older adults love to learn, and that's the one thing they do as a participant in any research, is learn.
And that's a great
wonderful.
segue to a question that Michelle had for you all. As lifelong learning is a cornerstone of your work, how would you say communities and institutions can encourage older adults to continue engaging and learning opportunities?
Was that for me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, from my experience, it's always participatory, having them totally involved in what you're doing. And I can use my PhD as an example. I used photo voice as my method of data collection. So each older adult had the opportunity to provide me with photographs of what was supporting or limiting them to continue aging in their place of choice. And they each gave me 4 photographs. Because we had all this wonderful knowledge, we decided as a group that we needed to have a knowledge sharing open house. So each of my participants had I blew up their photographs, and so they were sitting in there at the open house with their 4 photographs. And when people came in, they had the opportunity to go directly to the older adult themselves to learn why. And one of the people there was a minister responsible for seniors. And 5 months later, she introduced a new program. And she publicly announced it was because of the opportunity to talk with these women. So the voice of the older person was so important in that respect.
That is so incredibly powerful. So I'm going to do an Allison here and start to close things out for us. But just to remind the audience that all 3 of your panelists here will be attending the AgeWell conference from October the 24th to the 26th in Toronto, Ontario. And that registration is open to anyone who's interested. So I think Ashley is in the process of sharing that registration page in the chat for you. I think she's got it online, a little graphic. And now I'll hand it back to Allison for the final remarks.
Thanks so much, Josephine. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending our public webinar today. As a reminder, the recording is available on our YouTube page, so you can watch that again or share with anyone within your network. On behalf of AgeWell, I'd like to thank our panelists so much for this really important discussion. I know it will be viewed many times following this live event, so I really appreciate your comments. And honestly, inspiration, not because seniors are inherently inspirational, but because what you said was really insightful and really helps to challenge the perceptions that we have of older adults and caregivers being involved in research. And I hope that our researchers can take this on board as they continue their journey. So thank you so much. And I hope everyone has an excellent day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next AgeWell webinar. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone for attending. Lovely to see you all. Bye.
Hi, everyone.